Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. And I have a show I've been waiting for about 6 weeks. I mean, I'm so excited to have our guest on the show. It's hard to book him in, but of course, we finally been able to do it. And for the people watching the show today, you're in for a huge treat, because after 30 minutes of listening and understanding what Mr. Nick Prefontaine is all about, you're going to walk away from this interview not only feeling better about yourself, but motivated and ready to lead, ready to, take on the world, be inspired, and, move forward one step at a time in your life to make sure that you have the best possible life. So I'm so excited to have Mr. Nick Prefontaine on the show. He's the founder and CEO of Common Goal. And they're really a company that inspires and leads and motivates people and leads motivated people to their common goal. And I love it so much. So Nick, welcome to the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
It's all wrapped up in one, Andy. You nailed it. And I've been looking forward to this interview as well. I can feel your energy, and hopefully I can bring it for your listeners as well, and we can match each other right up here.
I love it. You have such a great background, such a great story, of course, when you were a young man, with an accident that happened and you had this mindset about getting out of the hospital. But I don't want to spoil it for our viewers. Let's pull the lens back. Let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet. Tell us about Common Goal. Tell us about the story that started it all. And then we have got so many questions for you.
30,000 feet. I've never heard that's going up there. That's going up there. I've always done 10. I'll give you a 10,000 foot view, but 30,000 feet. Wow. You're already setting the bar pretty high. So I like to, where it all started for me, I was at ski club with my friends when I was in 8th grade. And on the way to the mountain, as I was getting ready and being proactive, my friends and I were the only ones who did this, but we would bring our gear on the bus so we would get ready. So as not to miss a precious moment, Andy, once we got to the mountain. So we got to the mountain, the rest of my classmates and friends went inside to get ready, but not us. We were ready to go. So we got in line for the chairlift, and on the ride up, we noticed that it had been raining earlier in the day, and we noticed that it was a little icy because of that. So people were wiping out everywhere. Now, right on that ride, everyone was talking. All my friends were talking. Anyone to go off that jump would be crazy. Like no one's going to do that. And of course, I took it, as I take everything to this day, any slight or anything like that, as a challenge. So I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and charged towards that jump with all my speed. It was the biggest one in the terrain park, but going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow. And that's the last thing that I remember. I was told later that they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital because it was so severe. They wanted to life flight me to the ICU at UMass Memorial Hospital in Worcester, but they weren't able to. So because it was too windy. So that gives you in that little introduction that I said so far, that gives you an idea of the conditions. So it was not ideal conditions, but of course you got to charge ahead, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Nick. Of course, you charged the head. And then really what happened, is you really suffered a life-threatening accident. This was what some people call a life-threatening snowboard accident. And some of the people, the doctors, the powers that be, told you that you would never walk or talk or maybe even eat again on your own. And at that time, take us through what happened, because eventually you made this personal goal, applying what you call the step system, really to become, a walking, talking, eating person that's now motivating people throughout the world. So let's talk about that.
Absolutely. So I was later told that they couldn't life flight me and everything like that. So they had to send in a crew of paramedics. Out of all the paramedics on the staff for the hospital, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot, Andy, and I needed that to be able to breathe, because that basically, for anyone that knows medically, it paralyzes you, and I needed that due to the severity of my injury to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. Then, once I got to the hospital, I was told, or my parents were told rather, I was non-coherent at this point. I was out for the count. But the doctors told my parents that I probably wouldn't ever walk, talk, or eat on my own again.
Wow, that's incredible, Nick. And of course, your parents, I know that they probably knew that you had something inside you that you would, and I'm sure they hoped and prayed for that. Let's talk about it just a little bit, because obviously we want to fast forward a little bit, but I'm curious, when you hit that edge on that snowboard and you had this terrible accident and you were out of it, you were knocked out, you were, what some people may call, in a suspended animated state. Do you remember being in that state? Do you remember the time when you were not conscious, or was all of it a blur after it all happened?
Interesting, very interesting question. And there's an interesting distinction about that within my story that a lot of people don't realize. That's from the impact alone, the doctors shared with my family that I would have been out in a coma on the impact alone for roughly 7 or 10 days because it was so severe. However, they had to induce me, rather. I always get those two words mixed up, but they had because they're so similar. But they had to induce me into a coma because the swelling was so high in my brain that they were worried if I woke up and I panicked and I was, what happened? Why am I here? Who are you people? That the swelling would go up, and as a result, I would die. So there were a few things like that, and that from that day or around my accident. And one thing I already shared was the right paramedic showed up at the mountain, and the second one, that was the second one. Pretty amazing. They had to induce me so that the swelling would go down, so it would be okay. So I ended up round trip, I guess you could say. I ended up being in a coma for 3 weeks. I don't remember, because it was partially induced. I don't remember a month of my life.
Wow, so interesting.
My life is gone. So roughly March 4th was the first memories that I can say, okay, it starts to click, and I start to say, I had my awareness of my surroundings, and I knew what was happening, and the work that was left in front of me.
Yeah, so interesting. Of course, there was another reason, that day for the paramedic who knew how to sort of revive you and keep you alive was on the mountain that particular day, the one, in the entire area. So interesting. Let's step it forward a little bit. So here you are, you had this situation. You decided, as an older person, that you wanted to take this story and use it to help inspire and lead other people. So let's talk about it. On your website, you can download a free step system that will help people move beyond any life challenge. But for the people watching the show, let's get into it. Let's talk about it. For people that are having life challenges, and there's a lot of people now, Nick, that are having life challenges, especially, of course, as we've gotten through and the pandemic, and people are a little uncertain on where that's going to lead. And some things in the world seem to be a little, unusual, a little destabilized. It's making people feel a little unstable themselves, some people. for those people, how do they move beyond the challenges that they're having? What advice do we bring to the table for the people watching the show that are maybe a little bit unsure and need to be inspired to take on life in a much better way?
Really interesting, Andy, that all throughout my life, regardless of what I'm doing, I'm talking when I was in high school, after when I got out of high school and I started working, all throughout my career and all throughout my life, I have always been drawn to people that are going through a life challenge, trauma, or other crisis or setback in their life. And the goal every single time, is to work with them to help them get through to the other side of that, whatever it is. And on the other side of that lies their infinite potential and their infinite possibilities once they're through their trauma or setback. So I've always naturally gravitated, I guess you could even say energetically, I've gravitated towards those people, because it's so amazing that when things like that happen to people, everyone around them shuts down, because they don't know, they can't fathom dealing with that themselves, and what they immediately impose their beliefs and everything on that. So they shut down, and they don't want to help. They don't know what to say, because they don't know how to help that person. All throughout my life, even before I formed Common Goal, I have naturally been gravitated and helped those people unlike any other way that anyone else can do. So now with Common Goal, all that we're doing is helping more people on an even bigger scale. We're helping them to take their first step and get through their suffering onto the other side. What I would recommend, and what we recommend for everyone, is just take it one step at a time. So at the very beginning, you just have to take your first step. That's what's most important. And then once you take your first step, you have to trust that there will always be a next step available to you. And that's what I've done throughout my life. And that's what's led me to right here with you, talking with you today.
Yeah, Nick, it's so interesting. And of course, you talk about that first step, and it just resonates for me, because some people become paralyzed and they can't take that first step. And what you're saying, and what really has worked well for me in my life as well, and many entrepreneurs that we speak with, is just take a step. It's going to lead somewhere, and it might not lead to where you thought it was going to take you, but it takes you somewhere, and oftentimes it leads you in a different direction that maybe is even better than the first direction you thought it was going to take you. Is that the idea?
That's true. Absolutely. And I would like to say that what we created, Andy, and I think it's helpful for everyone to know listening to this, what we created is the STEP system. So the STEP system STEP is an acronym. And I'm going to be able to give your listeners a little bit of information about how to download a free PDF at the end of this to help them to take their first step. But it's just an acronym. It's a very simple acronym. It's S is support. You have to make sure that you have your support lined up right from the start. This will have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. And it really frees up so much of your mental energy that you can focus on getting better and focus on your objective. If you're not worrying about, I wonder if they're helping me, or I wonder who's showing up or helping me. That's why support is so important. I'll just give you in your words, I'll give you a 30,000 foot view here. So T of the acronym is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, the next step will always be available to you. And this also goes back to trusting yourself. So the way that I always like to talk about this or illustrate trust is that when I first got in my accident, my parents had a goal for me, and that was to make a full recovery. Any parent would want that for their child who gets in an accident. However, around the time, and I actually think it's the exact time that I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me. So March 4th, I got in the accident on February 5th, but I would say March 4th, when I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me, I had a goal to run out of the hospital. And that came from inside of me. So I think the reason why I want to share that story is it helps illustrate trust, because you have to, I think we all as a society, everyone can get used to silencing that voice or ignoring it or rationalizing away that, no, that's not what I should be worrying about. That's not practical. That's not reasonable. But you have to listen to that voice, because that goal of running out of the hospital, that became our common goal, to give you a full picture of where it's all coming from. Then E is energy. If you don't have your energy, how can you affect and support people that are around you? Now, this is going back or going to talk about anything to do with yoga, meditation, taking care of your energy and having internal body awareness. If you don't have your energy, how are you going to be the most effective for other people in your life? And then P is persistence. Persistence, once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. This is important, Andy, because people think whenever they're looking to start something, they always think that I have to go from 0 to 1,000,000 right away. So it becomes daunting to them, so they don't take any action. But what we found is once you take a small step, and it doesn't matter how small, just keep making progress daily, weekly, just keep moving forward. Once you take that step, your next step will always become available to you, and you have to keep going. Because as long as you keep moving forward and you keep taking that next step, there's nothing that can stop you.
Yeah, I love it. It's so powerful. Support, trust, energy, and persistence, the STEP program. And of course, some people call it canny, constant and never-ending improvement. You call it continual progress and keep taking a step forward. Let's talk about what I call dream stealers. In people's lives, they encounter people that continually say they can't do this, they can't do that. No, you can't. Especially, sometimes parents raise their kids with a can't do attitude. And that's something that I just don't understand. I always feel you should raise a child with a can-do attitude, that you can do something, that yes, let's go for it. And like you say, take that first step and let's see where it goes. For the people that, sort of get attacked all the time with people saying they can't do this and they can't do that, I have to imagine it kind of wears them down a little bit. For those people that maybe need a little pep or need a little can-do thought process, what can you share with them to help them take that first step that will then lead to something that's going to be great?
Naysayers is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, naysayers. Yeah. What do we do with the naysayers?
The naysayers, so there might be a little bit of a, you're probably not going to expect or anyone's going to expect I'm going to say, but you're not going to get rid of naysayers. Naysayers are always going to be out there and always going to be telling you that you're crazy. You can't do that. 100%. It's going to be there all the time. What I'm talking about and what we like to talk about at Common Goal is that's the negative self-talk, and that's the negative voice. Everyone has the two voices in their head, but you have to continue to keep taking that next step. And Then outside, whether it's friends or peers or anyone like that saying you can't do it, if you're hanging out with them all the time and they're telling you can't do it, you should probably consider getting new friends, number one. But you're always going to have that. What you have to understand is that by having that belief in yourself and listening to that voice, because we all have that higher voice in our head, whatever you want to call it, inspiration, God, the universe, Buddha, all the terms in the world you could say, you could fill in with all those. That voice is within all of us. So if you get quiet enough, and we haven't even talked about like a morning routine, and that you have to really, and that goes back to taking care of your energy. I'm just trying to give you a 30,000 foot view, Andy. If we all listen to that voice, we all have it, it's going to lead to a better world.
Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. And you mentioned, energy, the E in the STEP program, support, trust, energy, persistence. Let's talk about it, the morning routine. Let's talk about how to quiet down a little bit. What do you recommend for people to sort of, get their energy right so that they can, inspire themselves to have a great life? What do we do in the morning? What's our morning routine look like?
Absolutely. This is interesting because at one point in my life, it didn't exist. So I think that's important for everyone to hear, because once they hear about it, like, oh, wow, that's a lot. But it came about because I kept taking that next step and adding one thing at a time. So at first in 2009, that's where I got introduced to my doctor. He's a Chinese doctor, Dr. Ming Wu. He's a Taoist energy healer. I got introduced to him in 2009. And then once I started seeing him, and I still see him monthly for treatments, for maintenance, he was the one that actually taught me how to meditate. Now, when people say meditate, I want to get rid of the stigma around it, because for a lot of people, they hear the word meditate and they think of someone wearing robes and a shaved head, sitting cross-legged on the top of a mountain, chanting That's not what meditation is. All meditation is getting quiet for minutes per day. And that's all it is, especially at the beginning. Because if you told, I would say this is interesting, because if you told me back in 2009 or 2010 that I would have a consistent practice, a meditation practice, I would have told you were crazy, because, oh my God, I would never be able to do that. But I can say during COVID, not right now, because we fluctuate during our lives and we have to be patient with ourselves. Right now, I'm meditating for probably 20 to 30 minutes a day, but it fluctuates during your life. During COVID, because of the extreme stress and everything that was going on in the world, I was meditating for, gosh, Andy, I would call it 45 minutes to an hour that I was meditating during that time. But it all started with one step. It all started with minutes at a time. So all I started with, what my teacher told me to try it for 10 minutes. And I was like, oh God, 10 minutes is too long. Okay, try it for 5 minutes. So I just worked up over the years that's one of the biggest things that I do in the morning, to really get myself centered and to be able to be my best all day. Then after I read and have coffee or tea, if I run, I have tea. I'm going to be reading and writing in my journal for probably 30 to 60 minutes. And this is to just do a mind dump. Mainly it's gratitude. a lot of people have reflected back to me that, wow, you have a very high level of gratitude. You're very grateful. And I think that's partly because of my accident, but it's partly because I've been doing this practice for 14 years now, with the meditation and the focusing. So I think that's so important. And anyone can start doing that, which I think is the most powerful thing about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Of course, this moving forward with gratitude is something that you become known for throughout your life. And we hear it all the time. I mean, even if you aren't working out, but you want to start, maybe you take a 5-minute walk the first day, and then you take a 10-minute walk, and then a 15-minute walk, as it progresses. Maybe you start jogging a little bit after that. It's all about progress, constant and never-ending improvement. Like you mentioned through your STEP program with the support, trust, the energy that we just talked about, and the persistence, which is necessary. I know you've only cut out a certain amount of time, Nick. This is great to have you on the show. I already know I'm going to bring you back on because we have so much to unpack, but I want to talk to the entrepreneurs. I want to talk to especially, let's say, younger entrepreneurs watching the show that maybe are having a tough time. Maybe they're having a roadblock. Maybe they don't know what step to take in their career or in their path. I'm hoping based on what you've developed as part of your program, you can talk to the entrepreneurs right now on the show that are watching that are maybe having a tough time. What kind of advice can you give to the entrepreneurs watching this show on how to keep moving forward through those tough times, taking, of course, some of the concepts that you've built through the STEP program and letting the entrepreneurs know how to keep on pushing?
I would say when you're stuck, and this is another thing. One of the things that we teach all the people out there is that when you're stuck and you feel like you're running up against a wall and you're just not making any progress, just stop, take a deep breath, and just see what's in front of you for your next step. That's it. It's not very complicated, but I think that one practice, especially when you're stuck and you have crisis and everything coming at you, all the doom and gloom, like we talked about earlier, the naysayers and everything like that, I think it's very easy to get sucked into that energy and to keep spinning your wheels and worrying, what do I do? What do I do? I gotta keep going. But if you just stop, get quiet, take a deep breath, then the next step will become apparent to you. It's always there. I think we as a society have just got so used to silencing it or thinking that, oh no, that's not practical, I wouldn't do that. It's always there. We just have to be on the lookout for it, Andy.
Yeah, it's so powerful to listen to that sort of inner and cosmic voice, even as an entrepreneur, because the next step is right there. Oftentimes you know it, but you're afraid. And of course, like you mentioned, quiet it down, then take that step, and it will lead somewhere fantastic, because it always does if you have that type of mindset that it will. Listen, Nick, this is fantastic to have you on the show. We're going to bring you back on. I want to unpack more about the STEP program. I want to get into the support aspect of it. We spoke about the energy, the trust, and the persistence. But again, it's very important to surround yourselves with people that care about you and move forward with gratitude like you do in your life. In closing, Nick, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, we only had 30 minutes, but I think we could do 30 days with you and maybe just call it 30 days with Nick and change a lot of lives. Maybe we'll do that on our next show. So Nick Prefontaine, thanks so much for coming on the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
You're welcome, Andy. I've had a lot of fun. And I think in closing, to give, like I talked about, all your listeners the opportunity to download a free ebook, free PDF off our website, which is going to go into detail on the whole STEP system, and they'll be able to apply it to their lives. They could go and visit nickprefontaine.com/step, and that will help them get started on their first step today.
Yeah, we really appreciate the offer for the viewers. You have a wonderful day. Keep stepping forward, and we'll have you back on the show very shortly. All right.
You too, Andy. Thank you very much.